Morning, everybody. I see we've got a couple of people online already. We are talking to you today regarding traditional versus advanced credit making decisions. And today we're going to have a chat with the consulting team of Inoptico, and I think that's all of us. And I think between all three of us, we probably have in excess of 100 years worth of credit experience. Some of us probably 100 plus, but we've worked in as credit managers. We've worked in the credit insurance industry. We've worked with credit data. We worked in finance. So we've got a fair amount of experience and to a degree some knowledge as well in different sectors of what we used to do in the past and what we actually do now and whether it works or not. So I've got Louis Lombard and Martin Petsch with me. I'm Johan Marks. And with the audience today, guys, if you want to ask a question or if you want to add something, raise your hand. We've got somebody monitoring that for us. Thank you, Fatima. And then we can discuss certain topics and certain points of what, in your opinion, works or does not work. Those of you who've been in the industry for a long time will know exactly what we're referring to. So please join in, have a chat to us, and tell us what your opinions are. I've got a couple of questions here which I'll post to Martin and Louis, and chip in and discuss if you have anything to add on that, or if you differ from the opinion, or if you've got something else that you wanted to talk about, please raise the question and we're happy to address that. Right, gents, so traditional versus advanced. I know our company as a fintech business, as a digital company, always wants to advance in every single process that we do. We want to make it automated. We want to make it quicker, faster for clients. But there's a lot of things in the past that I think worked that perhaps we don't do and should do. And a lot of things that we did in the past that, when I look back at it now, I cannot for the life of me understand why we did certain things. But there was a reason why, clearly because, technology wasn't available or whatever the issue was. So the first question, let's just kick off and say, what entails a credit making decision, in your opinion? Where does it start? Where does it end? And who are the people involved in that? Martin, what do you think?
I think it depends on the level of the client as well, on the size of the client. There's various phases of involvement of people. If it's a very small client and it's quick engagement, the more you can automate that process to make your clients' experience with your business comfortable, the better for you. And with the way we are going with internet and things like that, I mean, if I think back and you talk about how many years of experience we had, when I started, we didn't have this.
Oh, there was no internet.
You had to phone someone. And you couldn't see him. Now you can actually have a video call on your phone with the guy.
Yeah. And the phone you used to use was one of those we used to love to...
I know we were a little advanced for it. We had the press button.
No, I don't have those.
But that's the first engagement. But I always motivate the credit and sales teams to work so close together because they speak on two different levels with our client and they engage on different levels with their client. The one engages with the actual user and the other one engages with the one who's going to pay the account. And if you don't understand that process, it creates so much frustration for us in how we engage with the client. And if you understand that, you can evaluate right from the beginning as to where you're going to go with this client. Because if you can understand that process, let's for instance say a client has got 30 people that's going to look at your invoice before they pay it, then you know your terms of 30 days is not going to work. So you've got to look at something different. And if you then say 45 days, the next thing you look at is your margin. So the whole decision-making process, the more people you involve, the more information you're going to look at, and the better your relationship is going to be.
So I assume, if I can understand what you're saying, is that you should know your customer and the client you're dealing with, because that is going to determine who from their side is all going to be involved in this entire sort of decision-making process.
Correct.
And that's obviously talking to the salespeople, relaying through to credit or sales or finance, whoever it is, that this is the type of client we want to bring on board, and this is their process of approving or paying our account. Understanding that, but from I think origination, if we look back at where does it start, where do I get a new account from? The people involved in that. Obviously, you start with your salesperson. And you start with your company's vision, where they want to go, what markets they want to target. So that strategic sort of the direction that the company gives must go down to sales, must go down to finance, saying, guys, this is the direction we want to go in. So
Absolutely.
in terms of who is involved in a normal sale, it comes from the CEO, it comes from the direction, it comes from where we want to target business.
Absolutely.
Then the salespeople have got direction from the sales manager, and then, right, this is where we want to target. So sales goes off, and then they try and get the business. And then it gets to the point that you make where we then say, right, who is involved on this client side when we're going to get paid?
Yeah.
That then comes through, obviously. And then from, when the customer buys something from you, that's when the tricky part starts. That's when everybody else now gets involved. And in your opinion, Louis, do you think there is a need for currently so many people being involved in a sale than previously involved, or not necessarily?
Going back to the old days, I think in the old days, the confrontation between sales and credit was a lot less than what it is today.
Yeah.
And it's the old saying that in terms of behavior, measurement drives behavior.
Yeah.
Where I think today the sales force are so driven in terms of profit and money, and that there's always this conflict between sales and credit. Where credit says no and sales just wants to go in and do it.
Yeah.
Where in the old days, I think it was a lot easier. There was a lot less competition. There was a lot less suppliers. We knew our customers much better personally, and all of that. Where that is not so much true today anymore.
Yeah.
Especially from a credit control point of view. People don't get in their cars and go and visit people anymore.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch on some of those points. But to your point, I think, if I have to think about who was involved in a decision-making process in the past and who's involved now, I think a lot less people are involved in that right now than in the past. That entire process, because perhaps of automation, because of things that people don't need to get from a person anymore, but they can get from somewhere else. So I think the people involved from starting, and even these days, you can get leads pushed through to a sales team saying, these are the leads you want, depending on your company's sort of vision and where you want to target. Here's a lot of leads. In the past, you didn't get any leads as a salesperson. You had to drive around, you had to phone somebody, take a picture if you have a camera. That decision-making process in the past was so complicated because of so many things that you didn't have available today. And these days, I just think it's a lot easier in terms of the entire decision-making process because of automation, because of things we've got available. So the decision-making process, I think, is one thing that will always be there. And in some companies, it just gets more complicated with age, because in the past, there was one guy who ran the business and he signed off the deal. You want it authorized, he signs it off, and off you go. Done. These days, how many levels of authority and groups you have to jump through, from credit controller to credit supervisor, credit manager, then the CFO, then the COO, then, there's so many O's involved that to get something authorized, it's just becoming too complicated these days.
And all those, the structure was flat. It's what it is today. Today, but also I think the size of the companies is much bigger today than what it was before. Yeah. They've got a lot more customers. There are a lot more buying power out there. Yeah. So it does change. And the other point I wanted to make is that a lot of the laws has changed. If you take it from the old days till today. Yeah. In terms of legislation and stuff like that.
Sure.
Where today they protect the customer, they don't protect you as a supplier. The laws are much more lenient towards the buyer.
Sure.
Where you need to have terms defined, 100%. All of that stuff. When the old days that wasn't.
I think in some countries, and I'm not sure where I'll go and have a look, is that they cannot understand why in South Africa we have to phone people to pay us for something that we sold to them. In other countries, they don't even do it because you bought something from me, you expected to pay, and if you don't pay, it's frowned upon. Here, if you don't phone the guy and say, am I going to get my cash? He is not going to pay you. Even though he bought from me, even though he knows his terms, he's just not going to buy. So, those nuances in different countries as well exist, where previously they might not have any of these issues that we have, but, in South Africa, it's realistic, and these are the things we're dealing with, right? We don't have a choice. So to lead on from that, what worked in the past but doesn't work anymore? What are those things, Louis, do you think that worked in the past that does not work anymore?
Well, the first thing I can think of is checks. All those we used to get checks.
I remember checks.
If you had new customers, you would say to him, you give me post-dated checks. So that was the way where you don't get checks anymore today. Yeah. And if checks are deed, knew about it immediately. We had a check verification system, this little terminal that was.
I remember that.
Every sales branches office. So when somebody came and paid with a check, you first verified if the check was valid, if the guy had money in the bank.
What was it
all of
called?
that
Very
stuff.
check or something, wasn't it called? Very
Yeah,
check?
very
it was-
check.
I remember because when I started off in credit, that wasn't even available, very check or
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah.
was. And then only afterwards there became a need for it because
Yeah.
that was the way customers then paid. You know, in the past, if you bought something, you gave the guy cash and off you went. But when terms then got introduced, the guy says, well, I'm going to pay you, but because, as you say, you don't know the guy, you say, well, give me 5 PD checks and then, we'll see how this relationship goes before I give you credit. And you don't have to give me PD checks because I remember postage checks being given to somebody was a schlep because I now cannot spend this money because this guy's got this cash, the perception of that. So, you had to be careful that that guy's going to come and cash that check on a certain date. And thereafter, you only got given terms saying, okay, you don't have to give me postage checks anymore. You now have a credit account. And I think, you'll remember those days where you sat with a whole batch of PD checks and at a certain point in month, you have to make sure that those checks get banked and ensure that they actually go through.
And the sneaky thing is the guys would give you a check at 5 o'clock on the 31st.
That's it.
Yeah.
And now you can't bank the check.
Yeah.
So then we used to go to the airport because the bank at the airport was open 24 hours. Then you go and bank the check at the airport just to get the money into your account.
Exactly.
But you talk about what doesn't work anymore. I mean, in the old days, this was the contract.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was saying, yeah. I was
This
just
is the
thinking
contract.
about that.
Now we say, in God we trust, the rest we check out.
Yeah.
Because we have to make sure who it is that we're engaging with, because there's so much fraud and things taking place today. People steal identities of a company. You're thinking you're engaging with someone, and in the meantime, it's a fraudulent transaction. I can remember checks, those things got stolen. So that's why we moved away from that as well.
Yeah.
And we said, we can't trust that process anymore. We had to do something different. So we automated it. The same with the contracts and stuff like that. We couldn't trust the handshake anymore. We had to move on from that. So everything that we used to do is still there somewhere, but in a different shape,
We're
or
doing
a
it
different
differently.
way,
Yeah.
but far more advanced,
Yeah.
far more trusted. But with every single thing that we do, there's always this capability of people hacking it and using it for a different purpose.
Yeah. And I think to that point, I think the most important thing we're probably going to touch on throughout this entire conversation is that, to an extent, as you said, nothing that we did in the past, to an extent, we don't do anymore. We still do all of it. We just do it quicker, faster, and different.
And differently.
Better. Do it differently, yeah.
And
Because in the
differently.
past, as you say, you could look the guy in the eye and shake his hand and say, right, we're going to do a deal, and off you go. I remember working at an insurance company, and a handshake deal was 100 million rand, and it was done, because you could trust the guy, you could look at him, and you could see his operation, and it was done. But these days, you can shake the guy's hand, he'll turn around and he'll shake 10 other hands on the same premise and do the same deal with them, and frauds and corruption takes place.
Now, in all of that, because of the controls that people have put in place, different things started siping into the business world as well. Where things used to be between you and me, it's now between you and my business.
Yeah.
And there's procurement, and there's sales, and there's finance, and there's different people of approvals that you've met.
Yeah,
So if you don't understand that complexity,
yeah,
and that's why we said we got to phone for our money, because you got to understand
yeah. No, you're
where in
right.
that process is your invoice. Because if you don't know that, your invoice is not going to get
I think
processed.
that's the first point. Know the client, know who it is, know what's going to happen on
Correct.
his world. It's not just a question of, yes, I made a sale. The sale is the first part of it. That's the first part that gets involved. After that, what needs to happen on that side for you to get your cash? And I think that's what most people, even these days, do not understand. I've sold something, the guy needs to pay me in 30 days, but you don't find out what his requirements are for you to
Correct.
get paid. And
Correct.
especially in the big corporations, you have to jump through so many hoops. In some instances, you have to walk your actual invoice through as well. We used to do that in the old days. Perhaps we still do it, but that's the problem we have. We don't fully understand who it is that you're selling to. And I think that's where the complications comes in when you say, well, this guy's not paying me. It's not that he doesn't want to pay you. It's that you don't understand his process.
And the other thing that I just thought about in terms of, what worked in the past doesn't work anymore is the post office.
Oh, jeez. Post office
In
used
the
to be
old days,
fantastic.
exactly. We used to put all the statements in envelopes. I mean, we talked earlier and you said it took you 2 days to just
Print the
do that,
invoices.
print it, put it in envelopes, send it out, the statements, the invoices, the end of every month. You know, if we didn't have the post office
They
there,
would never get anything.
I don't know how we would have got
Imagine these days having to go to the client and say, I've posted your invoice. You must go and collect it at your post office. You used to have a driver that drives up and down every day, bringing stuff from the post office.
collecting checks.
You don't have that driver anymore.
But what you had to do is you did that, put it in an envelope, post it, get it in, then make a phone call with a dial phone and say, did you get my invoice? Now it's electronic. There's an automated email that goes out to the guy that says, have you received all the invoices? Which ones are missing? The guy responds electronically. So the speed with which things can happen today is so much quicker. But the volumes have increased to such an extent, and we spoke about it now because of the growth and things of everything, that everything, and there's now cut-off times, because you spoke about it, we got a phone for payment. It's like people say, if you want your money, you must make sure that you understand exactly what I do, because I cut off time for my invoice to be with me. You got to have all the approvals to happen. All of those things, those complexities that lies behind.
It just becomes much more difficult these days, I think.
Correct.
To collect your cash.
It's a
100%.
laborious process today, actually.
Yeah.
If you think
Give me 10 post-dated checks. Their payment was done.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't
everybody
work.
was happy to say, now I've got his checks. It's
So the
over.
check used to be worth a hell of a lot, you know.
And also it made the legal process a lot easier the old days, you know. So if you gave somebody checks, so
That's
what
on the paper,
what we discovered was is that, so we would take checks where they would make out the check to, let's say, the company was Polyflora. Then if that check RD'd, it was an issue, you know, counted against it. But so then we started saying to guys, make out the check cash.
Yeah.
Because it was fraudulent transaction, fraudulent to issue a cash check.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money in the bank.
Yeah.
And I could actually go to the police station and lay a criminal charge against you.
Yeah.
So those are things that we could do in the past where now you can't. You have to send the guy a fine on demand, or you can start the legal process. All of those issues that
You could lock someone up for 90 days if he didn't pay you. 90 days.
Try and do that these days.
You can't do that anymore.
Okay, so to the next question then, what worked and is still being used today? What worked in the past and is still being used? If we think about things that we did in the past that we still do, I think to an extent in the past, it was, I think, very important if you wanted to do business with somebody to go to that person and look him in the eye and have a conversation with him. You know, if I think back in the old days, the old 7 C's of credit, one of them was the character. You know, you needed to be happy with this person who you're going to be dealing with, irrespective of whether he's got the money, irrespective of whether he can pay, is going to pay, whatever. You needed to be able to trust that guy's character. You needed to be able to look at him and say, you know, I'm going to do business here with you. Are we okay? And I think these days, it still happens. I mean, after COVID, it is difficult. During COVID, it didn't even happen. But now I think that thing that worked in the past still works today. You still need to go out to this guy and sit with him and say, you know, whether it's your representative or whether it's your manager or whether it's you as the boss, go out to the guy, sit with him and say, we're going to do business. Have a look at the guy's character. You're not going to find that out over the phone. You're not going to find that over on internet or, you know, how he pays everybody else on payments information or on trade references. You're only going to find that out if you sit across the table from him and say,
Relationships.
we're doing business. You know?
But I think the problem with that is, Jan, in the old days, because you had a much flatter structure, the boss actually knew the customers. Where today, the important people that make certain decisions around that customer, the payment, the on hold, that they've got no clue. They've never met the customer. They don't know it. You know, so it might be the rep, but the financial managers and the CFOs and those people, they don't know these customers.
Yeah.
They might know the top 5,
Important.
top 10.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
Because of their engagement, but the rest of them, they've got no clue.
Yeah.
They will sit at a party and the guy will say, who do you work for? And he says, no, I work for Inoxico. Oh, well, I do business with you. Oh, yeah. And meanwhile, he's lying. He doesn't even know the guy.
Yeah. But I think that is something that worked in the past that still works today. You know, there's still a lot of value in terms of that. And whether it is the representative seeing the guy or whether it is a representative that needs to go through a checklist in terms of the character or the business, I think that is still something that is valuable today that we used in the past, sitting in front of the guy and having a chat to him. You know, I think in the past, we used to work with, give us trade references. And, you know, we had a chat about that the other day. there's no ways in my life that I'm going to give you my 3 worst paying customers and say, phone these guys. They'll tell you how I pay. It just never happens. So, to get trade references, even these days, it is difficult for me to grasp the fact of why people rely so heavily on a reference, because you are not going to give me your 3 worst paying customers. In fact, you're going to probably battle to find 3 good ones. You're going to give me the best ones, and I'm going to phone them and I'm going to say, yeah, he's a good guy. What do I get from that? The comfort that I'm ticking a box. So trade references in the past used to be very, very important. These days, yes, it can still be used, but I think less reliance should be placed on things where it is subjective.
But customers have learned.
Yeah, they have.
They've learned how does it work, and
I mean, people throw popular around these days, and boom, you can't get a trade reference anymore.
The other thing that I'm just thinking about is that, in the old days, there was a lot more. So if the sales rep went around and collected his orders on a monthly basis, you can see when a business is in trouble.
Yeah.
If you look at the shelves, it's empty as that.
Yeah.
Where a lot of that today happens through call centers.
Yeah.
Where you've got call centers phoning customers, taking
100%.
orders. So we don't visit the customers as frequent as what we did in the past.
Yeah.
So you don't get that interaction or that feedback anymore in terms of, listen, I think this guy is in trouble. Watch out for that.
But what you're saying is critical, because it leads into something else as well. So now I'm the rep for Dulux Paints, and I walk into your store. I want to sell you Plascon.
Yeah.
I want to sell you Dulux, but I see you've got Plascon on your what's name. So now I'm asking you, who you want to give me as a trade reference, and you give me Wondercoat. You don't give me Plascon. I write down, in the olden days, I write down Plascon, and I come to I say, Dave, don't phone Wondercoat, phone Plascon. He didn't give that to me. Why didn't he give that to me? Then you phone and say, yay, one of the worst payers on earth. And you had a very open conversation with someone, that's why trade references were so valuable. Nowadays, they don't do that. They're also scared of the laws and the POPI Act and the National Credit Act and everything. They said, yes, he's got an account with us. What is the credit limit? Confidential.
Yeah.
Terms? Confidential. How's he paying? Fair.
Yeah.
What on earth is that?
And I think that leads to the next question of what is not being used anymore. What did we use in the past and paid heavy reliance on, which we don't use anymore? And I mean, that's one of the things. We talked about RD checks previously. Nobody uses checks anymore. We talked about trade references. And I mean, trade references only of late is something that they don't use anymore because of the POPIA, because of people being scared of saying something. And, what reliance can you place on a trade references where the person says, yeah, he pays fair, yeah, his account is good, yeah, we're not going to disclose his limit. Tick the box that I've got a good trade reference. How is that a good trade reference?
So sorry to interrupt, but I mean, the other issue was that customers are much more sensitive now than what they were in the past. So if you phone me about a trade reference of Martin, I'm not going to tell you Martin is a bad payer, because because then you're going to tell him and say, no, sorry, Louis gave you a bad trade reference, and you're going to phone me and say, right, I'm not going to buy from you.
Yeah.
That's the one issue. The other issue is bank codes.
Oh, yeah.
All the reliance that people placed on bank codes over the years, where now 2 of the banks have taken it away, and it's not as if businesses come to a standstill.
Yeah.
We still approve credit, we still do all those things. It's just
100%. I remember how people were starting to panic when they heard that bank codes are not going to be provided anymore. It's like, oh, I will not be able to do credit vetting anymore. Credit vetting will stop because I don't have a bank code. And, that lasted for a couple of weeks. And then people said, okay, well, how much reliance should we place on this bank code? And is there something else? And boom, like that, as you say, business continued. Nobody ceased to trade. Nobody closed the doors because you can't get a bank code anymore. People adopt, people go on with things. That is not being used anymore. Bank codes not being used anymore. Trade references probably not being used anymore. Checks not being used anymore. Yes, to our first point we made earlier on, a lot of those things we still use, but in a different way.
Yeah.
We still have it, but it's automated. So those specific things, no, we don't use it anymore, but we've replaced it with something, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you can automate those things to such an extent that you will know that your payments will still happen on a regular basis and things like that. But there's so many things that we used to do in the past that we don't do anymore because it's all automated, and it just makes our lives so much easier and so much faster.
Yeah.
But it's to keep track of all of those things and to make sure all of those things work.
Yeah.
Because if everything's automated and something goes wrong with that automated process, what do you do?
Exactly. And I think the next question is, what works better now than what it did in the past. And to that point, everything that is so electronic anymore, everything that is automated. And I mean, we had a look earlier on, in our days, and I'm talking way back now, there was no internet. The internet was launched, I think, 1991 or 92 here in South Africa. Prior to that, you could not go into the internet or Google a company quickly and see, how long have they been in operation, who's the holding company, who's the directors, and see what their products and services are like. You had to get up, you had to drive there and find that out. There's no internet. So that obviously works a lot better than what it did in the past. And all the automation that we have done with all the products, you have an electronic lead generation, you have an electronic application form, you have a digital signature, you have an electronic automated decision-making tool. Everything is electronic. That does not mean that people, to your point, is not necessary, because you need to monitor all these things. You still need to make a decision. And in my opinion, you can have the most fantastic automated system end to end. But in the end, you as a person still need to sit there and say, do I want to do this? Your gut feel that you have, one of those 7 C's. Am I wanting to do business? Given all of this information, do I feel comfortable? And you're not going to probably be able to do that by looking at all of this. You have to get up, go to the person, have a chat to him and say, I've got all of this. I'm now looking at you. Do I still want to do business? And I think that's a big important point. Do we have a question?
Yes, we do. Abigail, what about the financials? Were they used before?
Yeah.
And what is the importance of financials now?
Okay. I think in the past, it was difficult to get financial statements out of somebody. Very difficult. I remember working.
Why? Because they were in a book this big.
Exactly. They were written down. If you ask for financials, he's giving you a big ledger like this. This is my cash book. This is the petty cash. Here's all the petty cash locked up. So financials in the past, I think, is as important as it was today. Perhaps today financials are more important than it was in the past, because previously I could do business with the person without having to look at his financials, because I could trust his character. People were not as, deceptive as what they are with respect these days. Previously, you could still shake a guy's hand and do business based on it. I wouldn't need to see your bank account or your financial statements. I would trust you because we've talked. And I work for a company, I'm not going to say the name, and we went out to see a prospect buyer, and we asked him for his financial statements, and he said, okay, yeah, sure. And he went into his little safe and he opened it up and he said, well, that's the bank's financial set. Oh, that's for the buyers. Oh, that's for the suppliers. Oh, here's your financial set. This is for you. And they used to have like 3 or 4 different financials, audited financials that was there. This is the bank set. That's your set. And it talked to the audience who wanted the financials. So absolutely, Abigail, it was 100% important in the past, but not critical in terms of doing the business or not doing the business. I think these days, it's a lot more important to have that financial statement than what it was in the past.
But you must also remember, in the old days, the business, you walked into a business and you could see what the business is doing.
Yeah.
Now, you walk into the business and it's an office.
Yeah.
There's no visibility.
Yeah.
So he says to me, I do 10 million rands worth of turnover a week. Where? I can't see it. In the old days, the guy said, look at my warehouse, because he was all on one premises. And you could see stock there, and you could see the movement of the stock. You could see trucks going in and out.
Sure.
So immediately you had a perception of what's going on at the business.
You didn't need the financials. Yeah.
Nowadays, you don't have that. Now you say, I need some visibility.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can find that visibility
In the
financials. But I want to see it not in management accounts, because that's not been checked by someone else. I want something that someone else has checked to make sure that it's correct, that's the kind of stock that moves in and out.
I think that's one thing to consider in terms of the difference between today and in the old days, is that in the old days, there was a lot of cash.
Yeah.
And a lot of these businesses didn't necessarily put that cash through their business.
Yeah.
That's why they had different sets of financials.
Yeah.
Where these days, look at how few companies actually accept checks anymore. After cash.
Yeah.
They just say, sorry, we don't accept cash anymore because of all the robbery and the fraud.
I remember sitting in a guy's office. He was sitting there and I was sitting here, and behind me was the safe door. And someone walked in and said, there's someone out here that needs an urgent payment. And he says, well, what's the problem? And he explained the problem. I'm not going to go into the. And he said, how much is it that the guy wanted? He said, 25,000 rand. Now I'm looking in a painting with a glass thing so I can see what's going on behind me. I don't have to turn around. And this guy opens the safe door and there's literally thousands of rands lying in that safe. And it takes 25,000 and he gives it to the guy and he says, go pay him.
Yeah.
And that was never seen anywhere.
Yeah.
But now with all the touch points, the receiver that looks at your bank account and the receiver that looks at your balance sheet and all of those things, things are far more visible and
I think-
far more in the open. Than
I think to that you should not be taking your cash and putting it underneath your bed and have
It blow back.
feel it. Yeah, no. And I think to that point you made earlier on is that imagine if you in the older days and you needed to do business with a Airbnb or with an Uber, where they have absolutely no assets, nothing. Airbnb doesn't own any property. Uber doesn't own a single vehicle. So now you need to do business with them. In the olden days, you wanted to see how big this company is. And, financials were not forthcoming. How would you assess that? There's absolutely nothing visible as you can see. The only way you can do it these days is to look at the financials. So I think to that point, yes, financials are still very much important. And I think what people perhaps these days don't always do is that, I asked for the financials, I get the financials these days. Now I'm happy. But those financials were at last year's February date. A lot could have happened since then. Yes, I've got the financials. Now I'm happy with it. No, if you are going to ask for the financials and it is as at a certain date, make sure you get the management accounts to date because that's what you want to assess, right? You want to assess the financial position based on the paper. If you're going to look at the paper, don't look at H paper because what you might as well do is say, give me a trade reference of 10 months ago and all your information of 10 months ago, and I'm going to give you 10 million based on today. That's what you're going to do if you're just going to take that financial
snapshot in time.
It's a snapshot. Look at what has happened up until now when you need to make this decision right now. Yes, I've got the audited financials. Great. That was 10 months old. But what has happened since then? I'm not making my decision based on the financials of 10 months ago. I'm making it as of today. Get the management accounts. I think if that's any advice, try and get that because if your internal credit policy says at a certain value, get financials. Financials is not just the set of audited financials. Get the management accounts because that's the way you're going to assess it, right?
No, but also I think, it all depends on if you look at the financials, whatever period you've got, is that if you look at the history of the company, if the accumulated profit for that business is huge, then this business is making
100%.
money forever.
Yeah.
But if it's borderline to say that some years they make profit, some years they don't, then obviously you want more fresh information,
Yes, more information,
more current information.
Next question. What does not work better than what it did in the past? What things do we think doesn't work today than what it did in the past?
I'm now going to shoot myself in the foot because I'm working for a fintech business. But I think there is some automation. What frustrates me the most, it drives me absolutely nuts. If I phone a business and they say, if you want this, press 1. If you want that, press 2. If you want this, press 3.
Yeah.
If you want that, press 4. By the time they get to 7, you forgot what 1 and 2 was.
You can't speak to a person.
And you don't know what it is. Now you say, okay, maybe it's 3. Then you press 3. Then it goes to a next menu and it says, if you want to do this, press 1. And
that's frustrating.
You are lost. And at the end of the day, you say, I don't. Then you want to get in your car and drive there. Now you drive there and you try to find the front door of this place. There's no door. There's no reception. You can't speak and say, hello, is this reception? Yes, I want to speak to someone about this.
Can't do that.
They're working from home.
Go to our online web store.
And
Go to our online.
Yeah.
Can I help you?
There's a self-service function there.
I think to that extent, a lot of people were forced to go the online route because of COVID. But to that point that you're just making now is that how difficult is it these days to want to speak to somebody, a person, regarding an issue that you have? You can virtually not do that because, as you say, you jump through hoops, press this, press that. Where do you get the button that says press this to speak to a human? Because, to your point earlier on that you made is a lot of these things are outsourced to call centers. This guy call center sits in Dubai.
Yeah.
He sits in China. He sits somewhere else. He now needs to help you with the problem that you've got here. You cannot get in your car and drive to the guy and say, I sold you this. Why are you not paying? Because if I'm going to phone you, I'm going to get hold of reception, and then reception perhaps is going to put me through to a call center. The call center is not here, it's based somewhere else. you cannot get to the source. And I think that's the one thing that also frustrates me these days. And I think a lot of people, how it is so difficult to speak to a person these days.
I mean, just now we spoke about the post office. I had some experience with the post office recently of things that has been working all the time. To a certain extent, the post office still works. I wanted to renew my car license disc. Now, in the past, you could only do it at one place. You could only go to the test station, and that's where you could get it. All right. So now you can do it at the post office. You cannot do that electronically. No. You can't go in electronically, pay electronically, and the next minute they print your license out here in your office, and you cut it out and you go put it.
How nice would that be?
No. Exactly. But you have to get into your car and go somewhere. So I went to the post office. And here's a lady, very friendly, very helpful, takes my detail, does it for me, and she says to me at the same time, she says to me, I just noticed here that one of your other vehicles is up for renewal at this month. And I didn't know that. I said, oh, so you should do that at the same time. No, so those are now things that have worked in the past that is still working now and hasn't been automated. So there's various different ways to look at these things.
Sure. And I think to that extent, if we look at what things that we have today that speeds up all the processes, what things are available today, how does it work? Does it work better? What does not work? And to the same point you just made now, a lot of things these days are automated, which works a hell of a lot better than what it did in the past, right? Because you can get information quicker, you can get invoices quicker, you can get statements quicker, you can get a sale quicker because you can do it online. Those things work a lot better in terms of what we require. But at the same time, you miss a lot of things as well, which we've just mentioned, like that human interaction, like having to be able to talk to a guy, having to be able to talk to a person, because everything is automated, including your process of trying to get a query resolved, including your process of frustration when you've got something that you're unhappy about. That is also automated. So I think perhaps we need a sort of happy medium where, yes, the automation that we've got works for us, but not against us.
Yeah, but I think also the accessibility to information. We didn't have credit bureaus in the past.
No, we didn't.
Now we've got a bureau that gives you all the information. We didn't have CIPSI in the past.
Yeah.
So now we've got CIPSI, who the directors of a
works a lot better.
All of those. So the availability of information is just so much easier.
At your fingertips.
At your fingertips, which actually is very crucial in your credit making decision process.
Of course. Just look how things evolved. In the past, you walked into a shop and you had to go to a bank to draw cash to go and buy something.
Yeah.
Then we evolved. Then credit cards started coming into our world. A little hesitant in the beginning for businesses you paid 5% extra for things because they had a cost for a credit card. So now you had it, or you go draw cash, or hopefully the guy is going to take a credit card. Then it evolved. You could use credit card.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you've got one card. They call it a bank card. And they ask you, is this a credit card? Is this a debit card? What kind of card? Check card. And you can do anything with it anywhere at any time. You don't have to have cash on you.
I think even a step back on that.
That helps everybody.
Yeah. I think even a step back on that, in the old days, you weren't able to go to an ATM and draw money. In the old days, when you got paid cash in a little brown envelope. That was your cash. And if you wanted to draw cash, if you were so lucky to have a bank account, you need to go into the bank, stand in a queue and draw the cash.
Yes.
ATMs weren't available when I was growing up. It wasn't there.
No.
So all of those things didn't work. I mean, in our days it worked because that's the only way we had. But looking back now, what works better now, those type of things, that one card that you can use for everything, you can donate blood with this card as well.
You stop, you put petrol and you give them that card. You walk and you buy milk, you give them that card.
Same card.
You go into the restaurant and you eat, you give them that card.
Exactly.
Everything works from one card.
The other, what I was thinking about now is that the best check you ever get was your salary check.
Yeah.
Because that's the only check that didn't have to lie for 7 days before it cleared.
Yeah.
It cleared immediately.
Yeah.
Any other check had to stay there for 7 days before you could.
I can still remember people saying, no, we don't give terms, we take checks. I said, that's 14-day terms.
Yeah.
Because a check took 14 days to clear.
I remember that.
I said, and in the meanwhile, that I put stop to that check already. So by the 14 days go past, he's got your stock. You've got an RD check in your hand, you've got trouble.
And in that 14 days, he probably bought 3 times from you because now you got paid, you know.
Yeah.
The bank, the check, so you know, you can buy again, irrespective of whether it cleared or not. Good old days. So what do we see that is important? Well, what do we see that is not important anymore that we used in the olden days? And I think to that extent, what we don't see as important, and I think we touched on that, things like, you know, trade references. And I can't really say they're not important because we see it in a different way.
Yeah.
Things like bank codes, probably not important, but yes, we see it in a different way. I know from an Oxcoast perspective, we analyze bank statements, for instance, and to sort of make due for the bank codes that are not there. And in terms of trade references, you know, there's payment analysis that we do based on aging received. So although those things are still being viewed today, it is not in its true sense as important as it was in the past. Because I remember in the past, I would never, ever open up an account if the guy had a bank code worse than a C or a D. I would just not do it. And if he had RDs, forget it, no account. These days, if the guy has a couple of returns, it's not that important. You know, yeah, I'll still give him an account. I'll give him a smaller facility and I'll monitor it. You know, if he has trade references and the trade references it is given me are for smaller amounts, higher than what he wants to buy, not a problem for me. I'm still going to give him the account. So those things, I think, are less important today, less emphasis are put on it today than what it did in the past.
But the reason for that, Johan, is actually very simple. We spoke about it. People don't give you the honest opinion anymore. Bank codes were not very realistic.
Yeah.
So now we had to move to a space where we get those answers uninfluenced.
Yeah.
It's not how Johan's feeling today that he's going to give me a trade reference,
Yeah.
or my bank clerk, Louis, what bank code he's going to give me. It's analytics that looks at actual statistical behavior that gives me an outcome that tells me how this company, person, or individual is operating and doing business and how he's going to do business in the future. And that not just becomes more powerful, but becomes quicker and more trustworthy because it's not
consistent.
Yeah.
and consistency. That's the important part.
Yeah. I think to an extent, you know, if we look at the credit vetting process and the people involved, and, you know, we've talked a lot about what is important and what do we do and not do. In a whole, a lot of the things that we did in the past, we still do. I don't think there's anything that's not important anymore. I think there's perhaps things that are less important that, you know, we could say, well, you know, I consider this less than what previously was necessary, like financial statements in the past. Financial statements in the past, yes, perhaps not very important. These days, perhaps more important, and vice versa. So those type of things, I think, to an extent, tells us where we need to go with our current processes and where we currently want to take the vetting process. What do we think is important? What do we think is not important? And that talks to the information that we've got available today, right? It talks to how quickly can we get it and what else is there that we can use rather than what we used in the past? You know, what replaces that thing that we've got?
It's so, you know, and you get so many companies in the past. You would have walked to OK Bazaars, I'm just using the example, and you bought lots of different things there. You get so many specialized businesses these days that specializes in very specific things. When you want to buy a car, I'm talking about a new car, you don't go to a Mercedes-Benz garage and say, hello, I'm here to buy a car. And the guy says, which one of these Mercedeses would you like? No, I want a Jeep.
Sure.
The guy will walk outside, look at the name and look at you and think, what have I missed?
Oh, why do you want a Jeep?
Yeah, what have I missed? In the olden days, you would go to a car dealer and they would have cars there that you can buy. Now it's very, very specific. And in business today, we had to learn one very good thing. And that is to start saying no. To say, that's not our niche. That's not what we do.
No,
that's not how we do it. That's not what we want to do.
Yeah.
This is what we do. And focus and be focused and stay focused and understand, because the analytics that you're looking at is giving you very specific. So it's like to say, who is it that you want to deal with?
Yeah.
What is it that you're going to sell them? What is it that you're going to engage with them? And those analytics are going to tell you who are the best people to sell that specific product to. And then you start engaging with those people because now you know who, what, when, where, before you engage.
But I think it works well if you say it like that, but try and tell that to a salesperson. The salesperson is going to want to sell that Jeep to that Mercedes guy who wants to buy it. And that's the nature of salespeople. I see it in our business as well. Yes, we've got a product, and to an extent, it's going to work for the majority of the people. But there is going to be cases where you have to say, no, it is not going to work for
That's what I'm saying.
And the problem with that is that we've got salespeople who are incentivized. We've got targets pushed down. We've got pressure coming down. We've got all of these external factors on a single department or a person saying, you have to get this done. Now he gets a sniff of a buyer, irrespective of whether it's going to be a fit or not. And he wants to push that product down that person. And that's where the problem starts, because now the client is not sure whether he really wants this, but now he's bought this. So he's already feeling unsure. Now you have to go through that process of collection. You have to go through that process of understanding how you're going to get paid. And that just becomes more difficult because already this guy's got a product which he feels perhaps, I don't really want to buy this, but now I'm sitting with this. Now this guy's hounding me for cash. If I buy something that I really didn't feel like I would, and now people's going to start hounding me for cash, I'm going to like, I'll pay you. I don't feel I'm going to pay you like whenever I want. And that becomes a problem, because yes, you're 100% right. Know your customer, but also know whether your customer is going to use your product, whether it's a good fit for your customer in terms of your product, because there's so many influences that can affect the way you are going to get paid or not get paid.
Yeah, and that's why I think guys like Macro, that's called these buying cards, ShopRite, Pick n Pay, all this. It's actually so clever. So they can. I've got my buying card. They know once a month I go and I buy my cigarettes. I buy Coke. I buy this. I buy that. So when specials or stuff are coming up in terms of that. Now they know, just send
They know
your
behavior.
They know your behavior.
Yes, especially on Coke and cigarettes.
Exactly. They must know that.
And
they know what time of the month I normally come and buy those things. So that's why the same with, that's why Google is worth how many $billion is, not Google, Facebook.
Yeah.
Have you seen on Facebook where you go and Google or go and search for something?
Yeah.
The next day you start getting emails about those things.
Your behavior.
So how do they know that? They check your behavior. Yeah. They see your interest. And that's how they make
you post on Facebook, just landed in Cape Town. I can guarantee you within 10 minutes, Facebook is going to say to you, there's these restaurants that has been frequented by your other friends that have been to Cape Town.
Yeah.
Why? Because that's how they know exactly. And I can remember years ago, they used to say, one day they're going to install a camera in your TV and they're going to know exactly, it's already done. Yeah. There's no camera. They don't have to have a camera. They watch your behavior. And you know what? And we spoke about it just now, and it works still today, is if you want to know if this is going to be a good customer, is know their behavior.
Know their behavior.
We're talking about behavior, but in the past, we used to sit like this and look at the behavior. Now what we do is we look at the behavior electronically. Yeah. And that is where the changes happen. That is where the shift has happened. We now can say that Louis goes to Macro on the 25th of the month because that's when he got paid. Yeah. He walks in, he buys 2 cases of Coke, 17 cartons of cigarettes, a couple of bottles of brandy.
That's
I'm just joking. They know his behavior. And on the 24th, he gets a notification to say our specials for this month on Coca-Cola.
Yeah. It's actually very clever.
They tell you because they want you to come and buy more.
Yeah, and I think that's where they've replaced the fact of going to Louis and saying, Louis, how much are you going to buy this month? Or do you need this month? Or are you actually still interested in buying Coke? They don't need to do that. They've got that information.
Or send me
subconsciously we get it.
Yeah, stuff that I don't buy.
Yeah, they're not going to do that. But that's what I'm saying just now. Be specific about your product as well. Yeah. They're not going to send you any because they know your behavior.
You don't drink Pepsi, so you're not going to get Pepsi.
Exactly. So when you walk in the store, remember when the guy walks in there and he says, I want the Jeep. The guy's going to say to him, sir,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we don't sell Jeep. We sell Mercedes-Benzes. Would you like a
Yeah,
Mercedes-Benz?
this is what we have.
No.
Yeah.
There's the Jeep store. I have to be able to say no and direct the client
Absolutely.
in the right way. And you know what?
It's difficult.
No, but that guy's going to walk away and he's going to say, I like that I get Mercedes-Benz. He gave me good advice.
Yeah.
So one day, if I do need a Mercedes-Benz,
I'm
I'm
gonna-
going to go to him.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that's where I'm going to get a good
Yeah.
service.
No, you're right. Okay, I think we've talked almost the entire time. I don't know if there's any questions. We've got a couple of minutes left. If anybody wants to add something or ask a question, anybody in the audience, I think if there are no questions, we'll post a link on there in terms of just some feedback. We've got these webinars on a monthly basis, so hop on and we talk about different topics here. You're welcome to join us. So if you've got a topic that you want us to talk about, send that through to us and we'll investigate and get back to you, and you'll be part of the panel discussing this with us. So happy to do that as well. But just from the audience side, any questions or any comments as just before we knock off? Anybody there? Hope everybody's still there.
No.
They are. Okay. If there are no questions, ladies and gents, thank you so much for your time. I think we've had a good couple of things reminiscing about the old days here that came through that I forgot about. Post data checks and the likes of that. But yeah, it was an interesting discussion. It'll be available on our site if you want to go and listen to it or share it with anybody else. But from ourselves, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll have a chat again next month. Hop on, have a look at what's available, what we're going to discuss, and then we'll see you then. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Go well.